This is the Bringing Business to Retail podcast, and today I'm having virtual coffee, because I can't do it in real life, with the editor of Inside Retail magazine, Joanne Huey-Miller. Welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast, where I, Selena Knight, share strategies, interview retail revolutionaries, and delve into the minds of e-commerce experts to help you grow a profitable, independent retail or e-commerce business. If you're stuck in a rut, or if you feel like business is way harder than it should be, or you've overachieved all of the things that you've set out to and are wondering what to do next, or how do I even make this better? I know that you're going to love today's episode. If you're stuck in a rut, feel like business is way harder than it should be, or you've achieved all of the things that you set out to and are wondering what next, or how do I even make this better? Then I know that you're going to love today's episode. Hey there, and thanks for tuning in for today's episode. How are you going with ISOLife? Are you settling in okay? Is it your kind of new normal? And let me ask you this, have your spending habits changed? Now, I'm sure you're already probably an online shopper anyway, but are you buying more and more online simply because you don't have any other choice? A virtual friend of mine shared a really interesting article with me this week about the areas in e-commerce that are seeing a market increase and those which are seeing a huge decrease. Now, the top 100 fastest declining categories, they're kind of obvious really. Luggage and suitcases, briefcases, cameras, men's swimwear, bridal clothing, men's formal wear, women's swimwear, rash guards, boys' athletic shoes, and gym bags. Those are just the top 10. But it makes sense, right? If we're not moving around, if we're not traveling, if we're not going to work, those are the categories that are obviously going to go down. So these stats are from a company called Stackline, and what they have ranked in March 2020 versus March 2019 as the top 100 fastest growing categories are, and nothing's going to shock you here with number one, disposable gloves. The second, though, is really interesting. Bread machines. Clearly, there are a lot of people out there who have decided that now is the time for the perfect fresh bread. I don't know where they're buying the flour, though, because flour is really hard to come by. Number 3, coughs and cold medicine. Number 4, soups. Number 5, dried grains and rice. 6, packaged foods. Fruit cups. You know we can get fresh fruit, right? Weight training equipment has come in at number 8, and that is a 300% increase from last year. Milk and cream and dishwashing supplies. Funnily enough, number 95, which has gone up nearly 100%, was office desks, and number 90 was ping pong equipment. So no obvious shockers there in terms of the top 10, apart from the bread machines. And I'll link to this in the show notes, but what I really found interesting was there were the obvious things, like lots of foods, the soaps, the hand sanitizers, medication, nappies, toilet paper, all those things, but craft kits up 117%, hair colouring 115%. So it just shows that the things that we potentially went out for before, like the fresh bread, like going to the gym, like the crafty, we're filling our time. The crafty bits and pieces are filling our time. The gym equipment, we are adjusting. And let's be honest, this isn't going to end anytime soon. So before COVID, I had organised to meet up with the Inside Retail editor, Joanne Huey-Miller, who I met at the Inside Retailer conference when I spoke there back in February. Oh my gosh, how long ago does February seem? It was only sort of 6 weeks ago, but it feels like it was another lifetime ago, or is that just me? But anyway, Joanne and I had organised to have a coffee catch-up, but obviously we couldn't do that. So we decided to do the next best thing, have a virtual coffee chat and just shoot the breeze about all things retail, both here in Australia and overseas, who's doing it well, some of the obstacles that you're going through, because Joanne is lucky enough to be on the inside, on the inside, because she can see all this data coming through, all of this information goes through her desk. So she has been able to give us some insights on what's happening, some things that you could potentially implement in your business, and her insights for what retail and e-commerce and connecting with our customers is going to look like in the future. So come and join Joanne Huey Miller, editor of Inside Retail magazine, and myself for a virtual coffee chat on the state of retail right now. I really hope you enjoy it. As the editor of Inside Retail magazine, you have had your finger on the pulse throughout all of this. Like, you can see the stuff that the rest of us can't necessarily see. So tell me, in terms of communicating right now, I was going to say who is doing it well, but let's not go there. Let's go with, what are some great things that you've seen retailers and e-commerce store owners do to connect with customers so that they actually don't look like douchebags? Like, I think for the first couple of weeks, nobody wanted to sell anything. And then over the last week or so, we've kind of been like, actually, people want to buy stuff.
So what I find really interesting is sometimes I look at retailers' marketing, and I totally understand, this is not expected. People still have collections that they still need to roll out. And I understand that people had plans in place, so they're still rolling out what they would have rolled out. I'm very sympathetic to that. But I'm also a consumer, and what I think there's a really fine balance between needing to run your business and then also trying to relate to your customers at the same time on various levels. So I think there's a lot of hashtag #ISOLife stuff going on now. I don't know if that's something that you've noticed, but there's a lot of, I love a face mask. Don't get me wrong. I'm all about that. I'm all about that.
Self-care.
Self-care. And I think that's very important, a lot of that stuff. But I think it's sad to think about the longevity of this pandemic. I just really wonder how long we're going to be pushing things like, comfy shoes, because, you're going to be around the house, and face masks, and, those sort of pampering items. This sounds like I'm picking on a particular category now. But I don't mean to.
I can see what you're saying. You're saying, like, these people have taken advantage. They've kind of done the pivot in their marketing.
I get that.
But they can't rest on their laurels. Like,
no,
I reckon in 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to be overseeing that
really
stuff.
tired. And, this is the hard thing, because I'm a hardcore consumer, and I totally understand what it's like to be on the retailer side at the same time. But I literally just had this revelation overnight. And I've realized that, and it's not just retailers and brands, but from what I've seen, I feel like for all the talk that we've heard about distancing ourselves from each other, you can't have a barbecue, you can't see friends, don't even talk to them, don't even have a coffee with them, don't see your elderly parents. There's never anything afterwards that goes, oh, actually, that's really crappy. And make sure that you find other ways to connect with people. Like, there's never, or I don't feel there's enough of that messaging going on in the whole world, not just with retail.
Yeah. The positivity is missing. In copywriting, we call that the so what or so that. So you go, buy this thing so that you will be able to wash the dishes faster. Yeah. So they're doing bad stuff, but they're not giving us the transformation.
Yeah. It's, and there are so many retailers, I feel, that are well placed to have that conversation as well, and I was actually getting increasingly frustrated the more I thought about this overnight, because I'm like, especially as the editor as well, and in all the stories that we've done in the past year, there's been such great work being done by retailers in terms of connecting with communities and having authentic human conversations, and creating those genuine experiences for customers. You know, when it comes to things like Are You OK Day, International Women's Day, Movember, Mardi Gras, we are all about that now. People are getting into that stuff. They are on board. They're talking about tough stuff a lot of the time now, right? And it's like, but this is the time to actually check in with people. And I feel like this is the time that we should be having those authentic conversations. And again, I understand this is not the sole it really is not the sole responsibility of brands and retailers. I feel like it should be happening in all kinds of organizations. But as I said, the other side of me goes, this is a pandemic. No one knew this was happening. It takes time to put marketing together. I get that. You know, I just saw today, like literally just a few hours ago, Beyond Blue has finally got some service up specifically for coronavirus. This is Beyond Blue. If Beyond Blue has only just, you know, cottoned on that they need a service specifically for coronavirus, or it's taken them this long to put one together, this is what I think is probably more the case, then, you know, I understand that retailers might take a little bit longer to be able to, you know, get their ducks all in a row. I get that. But, you know, I just, I would really like to see more of that authenticity actually come through.
It's like, you know how they talk about greenwashing? I feel like we authenticity wash everything. So literally 2019 was all about sustainability and that human to human connection. But now that shit's got real and something that wasn't planned happened, nobody knows what to do.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it is, I think you're 100% right. It's okay if we can prepare for it, like, you know, White Ribbon Day or Pink Ribbon Day, sorry, if you know it's coming. But actually, when you get caught unawares, it's like, why can't you react to this?
Yeah. I think I talked about this with my team around International Women's Day this year. And actually, it's not even just International Women's Day, but, you know, obviously there are, you know, various events throughout the year where we talk about really big issues now. And maybe it's just because, you know, as a woman, sometimes I get a bit frustrated that there's only one day of the year that all these issues are put into the spotlight. But it's not just about this sort of thing that I'm talking about is not about women's issues. These issues that we're talking about now, mental health, sustainability, women's issues, men's issues, if we're talking about Movember, these are issues that should be going on all year round. These are conversations we should be having all year round. And I think if you're a brand that has those conversations, I'm not saying you have to like pummel people with this stuff, then that is more authentic than sort of just jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah. So has anything crossed your desk or crossed your computer, like over the last few weeks, where you've just gone, bang on, got it right? They did it so well.
You know, I just saw today a campaign from Seed, which is about how tough it is right now and how they're going to be, and they're highlighting new startups that are coming out. I think it might be actually related to the bushfires. So it's highlighting female entrepreneurs that have sprung up and have actually sort of responded to the situation that they're in. And the thing I liked about that was they were able to acknowledge that it's a really shitty time, but also they were able to talk about it in a positive and productive way. So I was really interested. I really liked that. And that's probably, look, I can't say that I'm across every single brand out there, but I really liked that one in particular. Is
there anything overseas that you've looked at and gone, like, we should have learnt from that, or we should adopt that, or that was a really savvy way? Like, it just piqued your interest.
You know what? I really like supermarkets, like I'm sure everybody does right now, which is something I wanted to talk to you about as well. What I think is really super interesting right now is how consumer sentiment has really changed around supermarkets. I feel like pre-coronavirus, there wasn't a lot of love for big major supermarkets. Not naming any of them, but like you know, I really felt like a lot of consumers felt whatever was closest by you, that's where you shopped. But I feel like supermarkets have really stepped up in terms of changing the game, changing their strategies very quickly, whether it was reducing their hours so that they could, get stock back on the shelves, or whether it was creating elderly hours. IGA has just launched packages for healthcare, a priority hour for healthcare workers as well. They've got the social distancing in place now. Like, I feel like they are constantly trying to keep up, and I understand that everyone is trying to keep up right now, but I'm super impressed by supermarkets right now. And in fact, there is actually something that Swinburne University is doing. They're putting together this project called the Australian Leadership Index, and it actually measures consumer sentiment around major institutions. And I think they actually rank consumer sentiment over a period of weeks. And I need to find the figures for you. But most definitely in the past week, consumer sentiment around supermarkets has actually foreshadowed state government, which, let's be fair, is not very difficult right now. And it's actually reflecting something that we've been talking about for a long time, which is that a lot of customers have started to trust brands, put more trust in brands than they have in those traditional
authority roles.
Authority roles. This is not a political podcast, so
No.
I won't.
This is really interesting because I am passionate about independent retailers, and mainly because I believe that they can leverage the fact that they aren't massive, and we're not necessarily talking small startups. I've generally worked with brands that are sort of sub $10 million. But it's interesting that you mentioned supermarkets, because this is a conversation that we've had in our team, which is I'm saying us as our business, quite often slag off enterprise customers as being very slow to uptake new technology, and that is because historically they have been very slow to adapt, very slow to make changes. But you have hit the nail on the head, is when it came to the crunch, they have been able to implement this stuff to actually help consumers as they're going on. Now, I have a question for you. It was a question that I was asked in a podcast yesterday, on my webinar yesterday, which was, do you recommend that retailers be selling gift cards right now? So tell me, what is your thoughts on that?
Oh, I can see the problem. That's a great idea. Well, I feel like it's it depends on how the business is going, right? Like, only the business itself would know what's really going in the back end. And if you really are not worried about whether you'll go into voluntary administration, then I think it's a really good idea I think it's a really great alternative to offer people, in addition to whatever it is you might currently be offering. I actually think that bars and restaurants and cafes, that would have been a great thing. I've seen a couple of them do something similar.
Yeah, it's actually, now that you've said that, I got this great example I work with this amazing speech coach, and he just sent me a Voxer yesterday of a bookshop in Portland, Oregon, which is where he lives. And apparently it's the largest bookshop in the world. It takes up a whole city block. It's called, I think it's Emily's Books. I'd have to check. Emily Powell's Books. Anyway, just Google largest bookshop in Oregon and it would come up. But what they did was they had 100 staff. Like, that's how big this bookshop is. They have 100 staff. And when all this happened, of course, who's going to buy a book? You would think, right? One, it's a book, kind of on the down, on the down. So they just literally so the CEO put a letter out on Instagram, which you can find it, and I'll pop a link to it into the show notes, which basically said, this is the situation. We're going to have to lay off the majority of our staff. We understand that books are not there for the time. Anyway, we would love it if you could buy a book. They sold so many books that they have put all 100 staff back on.
Oh, I love those kind of stories.
So I will forward it to you because I think it would be great. But I think what that's trying to say to me is you can't hide, right? We all know that people are doing it tough. But by the same token, there are a lot of people out there still happy to spend money. Not everybody has been economically affected by this. So maybe just being honest, like you were saying earlier, let's just go back to real authenticity, not this fake authenticity that only happens on nominated days.
Yeah.
And look what happens when you do.
Mm. I think we wrote a story recently around the product categories that are doing well,
Oh, share.
which was really interesting. And one of them is actually books as well, and that includes physical retailers and online retailers as well. They're both doing very well in terms of books. I think, especially in terms of people needing an escape. I think I spoke to Tony Nash from Booktopia. There's been a rise in fiction, so people want to escape. Um, and then obviously because a lot of people are homeschooling now, or they've got kids at home, there's been a huge rise in children's books as well, which is super exciting. Um, and hang on a second. Yes. And one of the things I found when I was researching this story is there's something called the substitution effect, which is something that I'm currently doing, which is so basically consumers, for every product or service that they buy, that product or service, they're buying those things for a particular level of enjoyment or fulfillment or satisfaction. So what's happening now is people are trying to buy new products and services to substitute the things they were buying before that can hopefully reach that same level of enjoyment and satisfaction. So you may have gone to bars before, now you are buying a wine subscription, for
Yes.
example.
Yes.
So I understand that people are economically affected, but, I certainly see, I loved going to restaurants and bars and things like that. And and I live in the CBD as well. So, now that I'm not commuting to work anymore as well, I have saved money in a lot of areas. So maybe that means that I can, buy things like loungewear, for example, or a new dongle for my computer or whatever, now that I'm working from home. So I think the opportunities are really interesting when you look at how consumers' lifestyles are changing. I find that super fascinating.
I just had a quick look. It was called Powell's Books, that bookshop. But I agree with you. I work from home, so my life hasn't changed much, although I do feel like I might be drinking a little bit more. And I've
No
used
judgment.
this example over the last couple of weeks in some Facebook Lives. My next door neighbor works in the city. And so she was saying to me, one, I'm not spending the $40 odd a week for the bus fare into the city. Two, I'm not buying at least 2 coffees a day. So that's
Mm-hmm.
$7, $8, $9, $10. And then because she works near Pitt Street Mall, she at least 2 to 3 times a week goes into Westfields and buys herself a new shirt
No,
or
I
a
hear
new
you.
handbag. So she was actually saying she has oodles of money at the moment because all that, like, we're talking hundreds of dollars a week, which, and this is what I'm saying, I know a lot of people have been affected and my heart goes out to those people. But as retailers, we have to look at our own customer base and see, are they still spending? We can't put our own biases and judgments on them. And she was like, I'm just looking for stuff to buy. Exactly what you just said. I thought I'd buy myself some new nail polish, or I'd buy the kids some books, or I bought some paints. Like, they have the cash and they're looking for something to give them that sense of enjoyment and fulfillment. And they're going to be trying new things.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, like you would have heard of the thing called the lipstick effect. So
Oh, no, tell me.
so I think it was after one of the wars.
Mm.
I'll actually need to look into the history behind it. But the idea basically is that even when times are tough, people still want to treat themselves to something small, like a lipstick, for example.
Yes.
And I think that's definitely happening. I think in beauty, for example, beauty, skincare at the moment, that's definitely something that's being played out right now. I spoke to Kate Morris from Adore Beauty, and she's definitely seen a rise in skincare right now, because I feel like a lot of women probably think that now is a perfect time to, wear less makeup, but maybe invest in, face masks or whatever to take care of
And they're
themselves.
not hanging out at Sephora in their lunch hour.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think that's definitely something that's happening as well. The other thing that I find really interesting as well with people's changing lifestyles is I think what's really nice is the idea that maybe people are going to be returning to slow things like knitting,
Yes.
gardening, um,
Reading.
reading. I think that's I think that cooking as
Cooking,
well. I
yes.
think those are really nice things, and I think those are things that hopefully people that will remain after this is all over.
You said that right at the beginning. You said it would be interesting to see what habits change, like how
Mm,
people's everyday habits change. And
mm.
I hope we keep that kind of stuff. I hope we keep the reading and the hanging out together. And even if it's just sitting down and watching TV together, or for some people, it's just sitting down and having dinner together.
Yeah, I know that at the moment, even though Ryan and I are struggling to work from home with Eddie, one of the nice things I will say though is sometimes, or a lot of the time, if your kid is not gonna, doesn't want to be cooped up in the house or doesn't want to watch you work any longer, you actually have no choice but to play with them. Um, and I have a 2-year-old as well, so that's often. But sometimes I just go, you know what? I actually cannot worry about this deadline because all I can do right now is focus on Lego and playing with my kid, and that's the only thing I can do now, or I'm just going to lose my mind. And so I think one of the nicest things has been being able to reconnect with him in that way, especially given he's been sick for over a week now. So we've been all at home together, finding new ways to spend time together. Um, and look, I can tell you that out of the three of us, he is having a ball right now. He has
I think
all the attention.
our dog is the same. He's like,
Yeah,
I just walk from room to room.
yeah, he loves it. He loves it. So I think I think those things are really interesting. And I was speaking to a retail designer called Gary McCartney recently, and he wrote an article for us, which will be published in the next quarterly magazine, which is about like his predictions for the future of retail and shopping center design. And what I think is really interesting is he was saying that after this is over, people are going to have a lot more interest, or even more interest, in connecting with each other, open spaces, spending time with each other now. And it'll be really interesting to see how that's reflected in shopping centers. And in some ways, I feel like a lot of the things that might happen after this are concepts that we were discussing before, but this has just been accelerated. So
Yeah.
we've talked about shopping centers becoming community hubs for a very long time. Um, you know, including more people in retail. One of the most interesting things I've thought before pre-coronavirus was actually how more shopping centers were or have been trying to focus on customers with autism, right? So there's been quite a few shopping centers now that have uh, autism hour, what's it called? No, quiet hour, for example, to
Yeah.
help people with sensory issues
Yeah. With the
be able
lower
to shop.
lighting and
Yeah, I
music
think
off.
that's really
Yep.
good. I mean, I say that too because my Ruby, my stepdaughter, also has is on the spectrum as well. So I know that shopping with her is quite an overwhelming experience. So I know something like that for her would be so much of a nicer experience. In fact, I think for a lot of people going into a Westfield when it's a bit just a bit
Bit
just
low
a bit
key.
less
Yeah.
is would be beneficial for everyone. But also, Westfield had sensitive Santa last year as well, so kids could actually go see Santa Claus after hours
Wow.
when it was darker. Just it's going to see Santa is a very stressful experience for
Uh,
everybody
I think so.
during daytime hours.
Yeah.
So anyway. My point is we were already talking about these things, so I feel like maybe the more clever operators will sort of be aware of that and cognizant of that, and that will be reflected in how shopping centres run from now on.
Do you think in a few months from now, when we're all allowed to venture out of our houses, that there's going to be a rush of people who just want to hang out in a shopping centre, like those diehard shopaholics?
Look, and because I am a diehard shopaholic, I am looking forward to going into a great retailer, into a great store. It's really hard, I'm in two minds about it because I feel like yes, people are just dying to leave the house. And they will want those experiences that we've been banging on about for years, touch
Yeah.
and feel and whatnot. At the same time, I feel like people's expectations are going to be higher because now
I'm
they know how to live without it.
I'm the same thing. I was just thinking when I asked that question, I hadn't thought of it until I asked you. Are we going to expect more of an experience when we go into a store, because we're kind of like, I don't wonder if we're going to walk into an average high street store and go, oh, white gondolas and some tables with clothes on them. We're going to see it in a new light.
Yeah, I think so. I think, like I said before, I think a lot of these new things will be things that we've talked about as concepts, and now it's just going to be accelerated. You know, why would you want to go into a shitty store
Yeah.
if you can buy it online, and you could be spending time with your family or friends instead? That's what I would be thinking.
Yeah. And
So I feel like if you want to be a successful physical retailer now, I think you really have to bring it on in 2021. Maybe 2020 if we're lucky, hopefully.
I was just talking to someone who is an Amazon expert yesterday, and he was saying, you said earlier on that beauty has gone up. I think they've had like a 300% increase in beauty sales on Amazon.
Yeah.
And there was another fun fact I was going to throw in there about Amazon. 14, there's been, so prior to this, your average e-commerce percentage of the pie was about 10%. So 10% for online, 90%. That has gone up to,
wow,
he said 17%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but realistically, that is almost double. So the amount of e-commerce sales that have happened have nearly doubled.
Oh, that totally doesn't surprise me. And I expect that figure will probably go up in months to come. I think what's really interesting, especially with the elderly at this time as well, I feel like a lot of them probably have been forced into online shopping now.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, you know, you actually don't have your son or your daughter there to help you. So, you know, I think that's pretty interesting. A new digital demographic, or more digitally savvy demographic than before. And I only just realized this very recently as well. Like, the opportunities for retailers now are kind of amazing. You know, if they know how to shop online regularly for groceries, therefore they'll be able to shop online for clothes now. Perhaps they'll be able to just shop more in general online. So it would be really interesting to see if there'll be retailers who'll be tapping into that. I mean, you and I have talked about the highly underrated older demographic.
Older demographic, yes.
It makes
the cruise boat crew.
Yes. Oh my God, so much money. What are people doing? They're a massive untapped market. There is so much money in that market. So many opportunities. So yeah, I find it really interesting to think of the demographics that are now even more online than before, or even more mobile savvy as well.
I don't know if you've noticed, but here because you're in Australia with me, that some of the banks have started telling people how to register for online banking. Like, they've literally got an ad that says walk through on how on your phone on how to register for online banking. So they are aware that this elderly group that are self-isolating just to protect themselves need access to money. Now, what do they need access to money for? Because they can buy groceries online, but I think it's very clear that they're trying to move them into the digital space. And it will be interesting. I think this is a great time. Like you said, if that is your market and you've always thought, oh, I don't need an e-commerce store, my people don't shop online, I think you will very soon. If you haven't got one now, you need to very soon. But then I'm also, fun fact, I've started a new e-commerce business selling luxury, made in Australia, luxury greyhound coats.
Wow, that's very specific.
Very specific. They go off to production next week. They're being made here in Sydney. But where was I going with that? This was not just an excuse to plug that. It was something to do with...
Do older people have greyhounds?
Yes. Yes, they do. And the e-commerce experience. Okay, that's where I was going with that conversation. And we only have a few places in Australia where you can buy greyhound jackets. And they're all operating on 2007 called, and they want their e-commerce site back. I do not joke you. Comic Sans font is on all of them.
Wow.
So for me, what I was going to say there is it'd be interesting to see how people expect a better level of e-commerce experience. Like, right now, we're all okay with sometimes the internet's a bit dodgy, or it's taking a bit longer to get my deliveries. But are they going to be expecting more in terms of abandoned carts? Are they going to expect more in retargeting? Like, they're going to, I think this, for the regular e-commerce online shopper, we are going to expect more.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And I'm quite excited by that because in a lot of ways, depending who you talk to, Australia has lagged a bit behind in terms of e-commerce. Just adding all those things like, being able to return an online purchase in store,
Yes.
shipping, delivery, having options, ship from store, endless aisle. Like, these are all things, like I said, that I'm very much looking forward to seeing become the norm. And like I said before, what I do find exciting is how people, the retailers who were already excellent, what they're now going to do to be above and beyond that. I mean, as a sort of related note is I've been talking a lot about live streaming with Dean and Heather on my team. We've been talking about live streaming for a little while because China, like a lot of things in terms of retail, has been ahead in terms of live streaming for a very long time. And now, obviously, there are a lot of organizations who are embracing that. I think the arts community right now, who I really do feel for that community. But they've been able to embrace live streaming in a very big way. And, the Sydney Opera House Art Gallery of New South Wales, they've been able to open up their doors and events to people. So I can't see why retailers could also be doing the same thing, both on a small and a really large scale. I was thinking about it today. Like, there are some amazing retailers that have incredible flagship stores that I would love to see the inside of. Everyone's heard about the Starbucks Roastery Reserve stores in Shanghai and Hong Kong. They're like these humongous multi-story behemoths. I'd love to be able to see what goes on in there. There's the humongous Nike flagship store as well in New York and Hong Kong as well. So I just think that there are a lot of opportunities. And the amazing Dolce & Gabbana flagship store overseas. That's not something that I would be able to enter normally, pre or post coronavirus. But that's something that I think a lot of customers would be really interested in. So I think live stream.
I actually gave that piece of advice on a Facebook Live 2 weeks ago.
I like how you think. I like how you think.
I also think, and tell me if you agree with this, that, I mean, you've been in the retail industry for a while. So I started in the retail industry in 2007. And what constantly surprises me is how all the stuff that was only available to enterprise customers back then, we can now buy for $29.99 a month as an add-on or an app, or, I'm thinking of like your Ship-its and all these things that you can have, all these customer experience things and reporting tools that once upon a time, even your endless aisle, things like that, were only in the realms of people who could afford to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. I don't wonder if there is a new batch, a new breed of customer experience SaaS tools that all of a sudden are going to come down to ridiculously cheap price points for the everyday consumer, the everyday retailer to be able to implement.
Good point, Sal.
Thank you.
Yes. So yes, I can totally see that happening. I mean, if you think about it now, like, there are a lot of independents that have contactless payment devices now, right? Like, you can just go to, I've been to growers markets and things, and the guy selling apples and oranges has like a little
Square
device.
Reader.
Yeah. So I feel like that's definitely something that will be happening in the future as well. So yeah, it's a really tough time now, but I think that there is so many opportunities to be seen, and I'm really excited about the new startups that will be coming out of this. Unfortunately, as everyone knows, there's been tens of thousands of layoffs, which is devastating. That's a lot of knowledge and talent and skill that's just flooded the market now. So it'll be interesting to see what those people will be coming up for the future with that knowledge that they had.
Do you know, you just said that, and I feel like we're just having coffee people are listening going, what are they talking about? They're talking about everything. That's cool. I have a feeling, and I don't quote me on this, but it may have been Amazon, because I subscribe to AWS updates, who are offering talent pool exchanges.
Oh, okay.
So I could find the email. I just got it today.
Wow. Yeah, that is cool.
Oh no, it was a company called Hatch. It's all coming to me.
Oh, yes, I do know. Yes, I have heard of Hatch.
And so they're offering talent pool exchanges. So if you can't afford to put somebody on full time, but you've been needing, I don't know, a CFO, I'm just going to throw it out there. There's the opportunity now to access people for even short periods of time that maybe you would never have access to before.
Yeah.
Maybe you won't ever again.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible collaboration. Again, these are things that we've talked about for a long time. Collaboration, partnership, retailers working together. And maybe it takes a pandemic for these things to actually happen. So I think that's very exciting to see the industry be able to cross-pollinate with each other and share skills and hopefully create future leaders in the industry as well. I imagine that if you'd been stood down, but you are able to pick up your career again, that means that you can then continue, grow skills, and then hopefully, share that with the rest of the industry in the future as well. That's retail leadership and training the next generation is something that I think that there could be a lot more focus on in the sector as an aside. But yes.
Can you tell me how are you communicating with your team at the moment? Do you do like a daily Zoom meeting So tell me what are like the top 3 things that they're talking about this week.
Mate, this week. Okay. The JobKeeper legislation just came through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's already retailers who are looking at reopening now. I think Kids Stuff is looking at reopening, which is interesting.
I don't think you can social distance in that store.
Yeah,
no judgment, but
children.
That store hurts my brain.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think that's what I can come up with for the
That's
time.
cool.
I'm really sorry.
I have to say I am 100% on board with the mental health thing. I've done, I think, 3 Facebook Lives about it in the last couple of weeks, and I call it the negativity vortex. I think it's really easy to fall into it because, especially if you're not used to working from home, we did a little free download about, some tools that you can use, but just even exercise. Like it's so easy to go, I can't be bothered. And I have a yoga mat in front of my desk. Like this, I was telling last night to the guy from Amazon, my current exercise regime is a yoga mat and 2 cans of coconut cream as my weight. And I make myself do half an hour, just a YouTube video, half an hour, 5 times a week, because you need that for your brain. Like if nothing else, it's not even about your body. To me, it's about the brain. And if you're used to working in retail and interacting with people all day, it is a very weird situation to be stuck in your house, probably with your family, that for more time than you've ever been with them before.
Yes.
And obviously if there's some, if your sales have dropped, or if you're in New Zealand, you've had to shut up shop completely, there's a lot of doubt and it's easy to fall into that vortex. But what I am really passionate about is finding some ways to pull yourself back out. So what are some things you could be doing right now? If you had to shut up shop, we talked about this on the webinar yesterday, can we look at doing a customer database drive? Like focus your energies on the things that you can actually focus them on. Don't dwell on the fact you can't open your shop. You can still grow your business in other ways. So I am 100% on board. I don't think we talk about it often enough. I think it's a hidden thing that happens in retail that we just overlook until it becomes Are You OK Day. And independent retailers, the people that I work with, they often find it really difficult to talk to other people about it, because if you own your own business, if you run your own business, whether it's 1 shop or 5 shops or 7 shops, quite often you don't actually have someone else to talk to that understands what you're going through. They can listen, but they don't understand it.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that. Like, guys, we've got to look after our brains.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that we have had a fantastic chat. It's like we've had virtual coffee. It's awesome.
Oh, thanks, Sal. Thank you.
So for everybody who's thinking maybe they haven't heard of Inside Retail before, is it just heading over to insideretail.com.au?
Yes. So we have a daily news website, a daily EDM as well that goes out. We have a print subscription publication called Inside Retail Weekly that comes out every Wednesday. The content of that also goes online. Usually that's locked content, but given the current situation, we've actually decided to open up content relating to coronavirus for everyone to be able to consume. We also have a print publication, quarterly publication called Inside Retail. And that comes out every 3 months.
Yeah. And there's so, and I think it's really important to say there is so much information there that can help such a wide spectrum of retailers. It doesn't matter what you sell. It doesn't matter where you're at in business. I'm always in there popping in and just going, oh, well, that's interesting, and spouting off some facts that I've read and making myself very
thanks,
important. So thanks very much for sharing all of your insights. It's good to be able to speak to somebody who's on the front line and is seeing what's happening in the industry and just having a casual chat about it.
Well, thank you so much, Sal.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You can find all of the show notes over at selinaknight.com. If you found something that you heard today particularly useful, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And of course, feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit by listening to it. Want more retail biz strategies? You can watch the Bringing Business to Retail TV show, where each week I'll answer a question or provide you with a simple, actionable retail biz strategy that you can implement in your business right away. If you have a question or a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Drop my team an email at podcast@selinaknight.com, and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week.